In this episode, we reviewed The Wrong Man from 1956. This was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. The screenplay was by Maxwell Anderson and Angus MacPhail, and it starred Henry Fonda and Vera Miles. This review was done last year live on my YouTube channel with Joel Gunz, the Alfred Hitchcock Geek himself. It was part of a double bill review with The Man Who Knew Too Much from 1934. What I've done here is I've taken The Wrong Man review out of that live review and I'm releasing it as a standalone review, and I've added stills from the film to give you, the audience, a reference as to the various moments and scenes that Joel and I discuss. So, without further ado, here is our review of The Wrong Man. How do you like this one, Joel?
I love it. Well, okay, so it's a very austere film to watch. It's to me, it's kind of hard work to watch. You kind of have to sit up and really pay attention to it because the pacing is a little bit slower. It doesn't have the witty, charming, sexy dialogue and sexy players in it. It's a pretty gritty, earthy movie. I would compare it to any Burgundian wine lovers out there, an earthy Vosne Romanée as opposed to an Oregon Pinot. Anybody? No. Okay. So
someone will, I'm sure. So
well, you kind of have to tune into it and get into that wavelength, and but then once you do, it's it's a chamber piece. It's real. It's music. Music on film.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if you want to recap it or I can recap the plot. But
yeah, no, go ahead. You're better at it than I am. You go ahead. Go ahead.
That's the okay. So maybe even to back up a little bit. So one of the primary tropes of Hitchcock film is as a man who's been wrongly accused of a crime and has to go on a journey in order to clear his name. And that's like half of the Hitchcock films. That's it right there, like North by Northwest. And but this one is about a guy who Manny Balistrero, who plays. He's a jazz bass player at the Stork Club, and he gets accused of robbing some local bodegas and corner markets. And it's a case of mistaken identity, and so he spends the movie trying to clear his name. And along the way, his wife, the beautiful Vera Miles, is tortured by this and loses her marbles. And so it's just kind of a dour, it's kind of a downbeat film, but it's essential Hitchcock.
Yeah.
One of the primary themes, and people have talked about this a lot, is that the idea. Catholic was raised Hitchcock. He went to Jesuit schools, and so he had a very strict Catholic upbringing. And the Henry Fonda character Manny, even his name suggests that he's a Christ figure, Jesus, the Son of Man, right?
Oh, right.
And so by carrying, by being falsely accused, it's as if, just as Jesus, carries the sins of mankind, right? And but it kind of turns its head on that because the story of Jesus is supposed to be one of salvation, and it has a happy ending. This one, doesn't really, and so it kind of questions a lot of those assumptions, I believe, that we make about our beliefs and how we believe what we believe and why we believe what we believe.
What's so interesting about this film is that it was, it's, for anyone who doesn't know, it's based on a true story, and apparently, I don't think he took any very, very little licenses. I mean, it was literally exactly as he shot it, is very much exactly as it happened. I mean, was there anything he dramatized? Not much, I don't think.
Not much. Years later, the Balistrero family came out and said, Manny wasn't that great of a guy.
Oh, so within the character, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think he might have exaggerated a few things, but it hews pretty closely to the story for sure.
This has always been one of my favorite Hitchcock films. And, I was rereading the chapter from Hitchcock Truffaut, and, as I'm sure Joel, he felt that making the style, like, stylized in the way Hitchcock often made his films, was not right for this story, because it was so literally really happened. It was incredibly. It should have been look like a documentary, like a someone lesser skilled, perhaps. But I don't really agree with Truffaut. I actually think he found a balance of, sort of like a film noir, you know, dark shadows, has a documentary feel, but then at the same time, he's still using, POV, particularly when he gets arrested. He's in the car, in the back seat, and then it's the POV is him looking to his left, seeing the cigar out of the cop's mouth, and then looking at the other guy, looking at his shoes, and then looking out the window, and everything outside is normal. Kids are playing, people are going about their business. And in that 1 second, this guy's whole life has totally changed. Again, he's playing with irony there, but with no humor, of course.
Yeah.
So, and of course in the jail. I mean, I love that. I love that. The POV of what he's looking at, the corner, the cell, the bars, and then of course as the camera goes on his face and spins around and around, as if he's, his life is spiraling out of control. I thought it's an extraordinary sequence. I mean, what do you think, Joel? Do you think you think Truffaut was anything he said valid there?
No, I think, well, I think it was a kitchen sink drama, right? So that was kind of an emerging genre at the time.
Yeah, it has that feel. Yeah,
and so it's interesting because there aren't very many special effects in the film. Excuse me. So you really feel like you're right there in it, and that this could, and by sharing the POV with Henry Fonda, that breaks, the documentary rules.
Yeah, because it's not objective. It's totally from his point of view.
Yeah, and yet it's it's essential. So I think people throw these labels around, and I don't think Hitch ever he ever really subscribed to those labels, and it's kind of like why his movies are unique. Like, people list their favorite film noir directors, and if you ever talk to a film noir geek, they will insist that Hitchcock was never noir because he didn't adhere to XYZ.
I've had a lot of those fights.
Right? They're dead ends. They're boring to me. Like,
yeah,
who cares? Let's just dispense with the labels and the isms and just get to make some art. So that's what it's interesting that The Wrong Man kind of straddles noir, straddles kitchen sink, straddles documentary, and without slipping and falling on its face.
Well, exactly, and very much in a Hitchcock way, because I think his style sort of met all the other ones that you mentioned in the middle, and I think it's an extraordinary film, and it's almost his scariest film, because it doesn't have, he doesn't have that break to laugh. He doesn't have the adventures or the absurdities or the surrealist natures. It's so scary because even if you don't know it's a true story, he's depicting it as totally really happening. And this guy, the evidence is stacked up against him. He's got the witnesses in the bank. Again, another great use of POV when, the bank, as the bank tellers are, is that the guy? Is that him? And then they cut to the women POV looking at Henry Fonda as he's waiting for the teller. But and then of course later on, I mean, what a brilliant shot where he's praying and
Yeah.
looking at the picture of Jesus, and then it dissolves into the face of the real
Yeah.
robber, who has a striking resemblance. I mean, I just thought that was so cool, you
Here's
know.
here's how I feel about that. So that moment is that's another kind of a metaphysical moment, just like the dissolve, in
Yeah,
the,
and Man Too Much. Yeah,
and it's but if we break it down, it's the idea is that he is at the end of his rope. He's finally brought to his knees and he's praying before this image of Jesus, and so we're led to believe that he's getting his prayer answered, right?
right.
So what struck me about the actual bad guy was that I don't see the resemblance that much. He looks a lot more like Boris Karloff than Henry Fonda.
Yeah, that's true.
And
that's true.
and he's also just got a hard look that Henry Fonda couldn't.
Yeah, that's true.
He was an amazing actor, but he could not play a bad guy.
Yeah, unless it was Once Upon a Time in the West.
And so the kind of the feeling that I get from this is that it's a case of mistaken identity, and not only these people are wrong, but they're really wrong. Like, they really picked the wrong guy in the police lineup. They really fingered the wrong guy, and so it, to me, that speaks to that's a nihilistic position. Like, in other words, what it's saying is that the universe giveth and the universe taketh away. And if we are going to attribute any kind of divine intervention to the prayer scene, is that actually a divine intervention, or is that just yet another coincidence piled up on top of coincidences? At this point, you could almost take a more of a kind of a magical view of things and say, oh, he's caught in a really nasty synchronicity loop spiral,
Yeah.
And of course, in Hitchcock's world, God and Hitchcock are interchangeable titles. the auteur.
Oh yeah, the guy. Yeah, he's writing the rules, right? He's the director.
Yeah. And so the in a sense, it's almost a self-indictment of him as a director, humanizing one of his characters, sort of bringing a character to life, to imminent life, and then putting him through this shit, and then saying, okay, well, I guess I'm done with you now. I'm gonna give you redemption, and I'm gonna tack on a happy ending to this film.
Yeah.
So it could be read as a very very nihilistic film, which I think is interesting, especially it precedes Vertigo, which also has some deep nihilism in it as well.
Yeah, and because he often would have, not always, but he would often have a happy ending, but here it's quite sad. I mean, it's really what happens to Vera Miles, that, I mean, and particularly the first scene with the lawyer, she's really with the husband, she's defending him, and then the next scene, totally apathetic, and because she's losing it and gets violent, and the stress of your husband going to jail, and in the end, it's like anything else, like nothing is just oh well, it was an ordeal, but it's over. It's kind of like the current pandemic. I mean, these things have lasting effects. It's not going to just clear up and everything's okay. I mean, these people went through hell, and those effects are lasting. And now she's now they have a whole other set of problems, which is really which is really, really heartbreaking. Do you see love in this film as a motivator or as a big factor?
You know, well, it's a heartbroken love for sure,
Yeah.
and she leaves him. She leaves him emotionally. Vera Miles leaves Manny. Rose leaves Manny emotionally. All that's left is just to do the paperwork, you know,
Mm.
and and so like they're in a culture and they're in an era where they're not going to get a divorce. They're going to stay together because that's what you did back then.
Right.
But if they're really going to, put their lives back together again, they're going to need help, counseling or whatever they would go see. Maybe their priest.
Yeah.
But so they were torn apart by forces bigger than they were, and it's going to take forces bigger than they are to put it all back together again. That's how I see it anyway.
I really love the moment when Henry Fonda sees the robber and he says to him, "Do you know what you put my wife through?"
Yeah.
And that's where, for me, he's not thinking about himself. He's not thinking about what he went through. He's not thinking about the damages that perhaps his children or his extended family and everyone. He's thinking purely about his wife and what happened to his wife through that. I thought that was great. That was such a, really spoke about who he was. I mean, that he was, a really a good guy who really, really loved his wife. And as you said earlier, they perhaps have taken certain liberties with who the real guy, but it doesn't matter because this is a movie and we're talking about that story. But that's just an unforgettable moment for me. I just thought that was just, the brilliant writing on the, to have him say that instead of saying something about him.
Manny is a sort of stand-in or avatar for a Christ figure.
Yeah.
And so even things like the process that he goes through, leading up to his arrest and leading up to his confinement in jail, is can be interpreted as the Stations of the Cross. Going through the Stations of the Cross in the Catholic Church, where I forget what they are now, but bearing his cross up to Golgotha, the impalement, and so forth. And the tone and mood of it is, I feel at times like I'm watching a Ruwalt painting brought to life. And Hitch was a big fan of George Ruwalt, and he was a Catholic expressionist painter. And so he painted, dozens, hundreds of pictures of Jesus on the cross, along with lots of clowns and lots of prostitutes. Those are like his three.
Quite the combination.
Yeah, right. And the prostitutes were sort of a Mary Magdalene, kind of a saved prostitute kind of thing. And
right.
but his work was like deeply, deeply Christian. And the painting, it's spelled Rouault, if anybody wants to look it up. And the modeling of these faces, and they're mostly medium shots of people, a lot anyway, are like deeply grounded in shadows, and the lighting in these paintings is very much like the lighting in The Wrong Man, and that they have the same kind of aspect to them of like the light and shadow is almost, speaks to a sense of, being in touch with not only the nuances of light, but the nuances of darkness, which is something that we tend to push away, especially Christianity tends to push away the darkness. But this kind of invites that darkness in and kind of owns it and says, well, this is half of our experience. The more we disown it, the more we hurt ourselves.
Right.
Kind of the message too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny. I never put the Christ, like, that's true. I mean, if you look at the story of Christ, it's it actually certainly mirrors the story of Manny. I mean, I certainly saw the religious aspects of the character in the praying, but yeah, you're right. That's a good point. It is quite Christ-like. He wasn't too crazy about this one. Am I right, Joel? And just from reading Hitchcock Truffaut.
Oh well, I think that comes with a grain of salt because it didn't do so well at the box office, and so
Yeah, that really influenced him, didn't it? Like,
well, it influenced him publicly.
yeah,
Vertigo flopped too, and so he disowned it. But I forget who as a writer sat down with him to talk and said, I think Vertigo is the best film you've ever made, and maybe one of the best films ever made. And he wept. He just burst into tears because he finally met someone who got his film. And so
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I didn't know that he felt that way. I love Vertigo as well. We reviewed that. My former co-host and I reviewed that last year because I think that's perhaps one of his most complex films psychologically.
It's absolutely. Yeah,
it's just a phenomenal film. Any other last thoughts on The Wrong Man, Joel?
Well, it's funny. I don't know if you had this in mind, but there is a very specific crossover between The Man Who Knew Too Much and The Wrong Man. And that specific crossover is in the assassination scene. All the people gather around the bullet hole in the window, and you see these fingers. If I can get over here, these fingers pointing.
Oh yeah.
From all these different directions, and it's a very striking scene, and it's completely unnecessary, but it just kind of like it's just one of these bravura moments that just drives something home for you. And that same image was used in a promotional poster for The Wrong Man, and you've got Henry Fonda in the middle of the scene and all these fingers pointing.
Oh, right. I love that picture. Yeah, I know the picture you're talking about. Do you think was that a conscious choice, or do you think people have just picked up on that years later?
It had to have been conscious.
Yeah,
he reused his ideas all the time, and each time he did it, they got a little bit better. Like he had a bug in his bonnet or a bee in his bonnet, and he just had to redo these things until he like really
cracked it.
Yeah, I totally cracked that idea.
Oh wow! No, I didn't know that, but I love that photo. I know exactly the one you're talking about. Well, Joe, this has been great. I've really enjoyed talking to you. I've learned a lot. I mean, there's so much in these films. There's so many books for anyone interested. We've done quite a few Hitchcock films, so you can go check them out on my YouTube channel, and you can find Joel at Joel Gunz, GUNZ.com. I'll put the link in the description box below. And you're on Twitter and Instagram as well. It's at Joel Gunz, right, for Twitter?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And Instagram is Alfred Hitchcock Geek, I believe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
At Alfred Hitchcock Geek, so you can connect with Joel there. I'll also have that in the description box below as well. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and or listening. I want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. And if this is your first time here on my YouTube channel, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so. By pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the movies logo, you will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.